Good morning.
Wow, in stereo. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another forms class. Today, we've got a couple forms to work on. We've got the 22Q, which is the pending sale, and the 22R. Who knows what the 22R is? This one doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what? If you don't know what the 22R is, it's a good thing you're in class today. I'm going to share my screen. That is the well addendum. Right, I'm gonna hide this
So they
guy.
couldn't do a 22W, huh?
No, I know.
Isn't the well, addendum tucked into another form as well?
There is, well, land and acreage has, I think, it on that as well.
That's what I thought,
Wow.
because I haven't used it as a standalone, but I know I've sold property with wells.
Yeah, land and acreage, I believe is the only other one that has it on there. Okay, well, let's jump to our first form, which is the 22Q pending sale. Definitely one you guys are gonna be utilizing quite a bit, sure. So buyer's pending sale of property contingency addendum. General comments, use this form only if buyer has, prior to this purchase and sale agreement, already entered into another agreement to sell buyer's property. An example, buyer's property is already under contract or a sale is pending. You must attach a copy of the purchase and sale agreement for the sale of buyer's property to Form 22Q. Do not use this form if buyer has not yet entered into an agreement to sell buyer's property, but plans to do so. Use instead buyer's sale of property contingency addendum, MLS form 22B. So first things first, it's establishing the difference between 22B. In fact, when we did that form in forms class a little bit ago, if you recall, it says don't use that form if the property's already in a pending sale. Use the 22Q. Well, now we're going over how to use the 22Q, and it's pretty clear. As long as you are pending, right, you can go ahead and use this instead of the 22B. What if the buyer hasn't even done their home inspection contingency on that property? Can they still use this? What do you think?
It's not pending. The sale's not pending.
What do you think?
Inspection, so, yeah.
Yeah. I know this one gets people. Zoom people, don't be quiet today. I'm gonna call on you. Do you think you can do that?
So it's under contract, we have mutual acceptance, but they haven't done the inspection yet. So it's pending inspection.
Correct.
It's still pending. I think it's still pending. I mean, that status changed, at least on the east side of the mountains. You know, it used to be contingent and not pending, and then it changed, so I'm confused about this. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to figure
Well,
this out.
this is exactly why we do this. So I'll give you guys the answer. Yes, it is the exact same. Does the buyer have a mutually accepted contract to sell their property?
And that's.
And that's the difference. So as long as they've got it under contract. So what if they're selling a home in Florida? Can you still use this? What do you think?
Well, you can, you just have to attach the purchase and sale agreement
Other
from Florida. I've had this-
Exactly.
I've had this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Not Florida.
doesn't matter where the property is, as long as they show that the property they have an agreement accepted. That's all they need, a complete copy of the other contract. It's kind of funny because I remember seeing ones from other, states, and they're just like a few pages, the whole thing, I'm like, wow. Look at our pages, our contracts are like 30 pages. It's pretty funny.
Welcome to Washington.
Mhm.
I got a little sidebar on this. I noticed sometimes like when you're representing a buyer, and you're, pending, like with whatever, it's inspection, and the other broker doesn't put, they just put pending. Is there, do we need to do anything about that, or we just let it just, like on the MLS status, is what I'm saying?
Right, so. Property statuses are supposed to be changed, within 24 hours. I mean, that's the MLS rules, and it's supposed to. Accurately reflect the proper status of whatever contract, that you guys have
What
accepted.
point you're in.
Yep, and in whatever point or stage you're in. If you write up a deal and you're contingent to sell. And you're using 22B. That status must be changed to contingent. They cannot leave it as active. You have tons of brokers like, oh no, we can accept other offers. Like, yeah, you can issue a bump notice.
Yeah.
But you still have to follow the proper status. Changes have to be made to accurately reflect whatever stage you guys are in. And same goes, if someone changes it to pending, and let's say you did a 35 in there and they're actually doing an inspection.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Because that happens a lot. Why would people do that? Why would a listing broker do that?
To save a step, to not have to do it later, or to not have to let people know that there's an inspection on there. Maybe those two things.
More towards the latter.
So if inspection fails, they don't have to change it back. Yeah.
If they back out based on inspection,
Yeah.
the status isn't gonna show it went from active to pending inspection back to active again.
Mhm.
Because when buyer brokers see that, and they're, what the first thing you do is, what do you say?
What happened?
Yeah, why? What happened? What happened with the property? Something happened. So obviously they walked away. What's wrong with the property? What happens if you see it go from active? So in the status for the history of the listing, it says active, pending inspection, active, to pending inspection, to active. Now what? What do you think?
You know something's wrong with the property.
Yeah, there's probably an issue. So some brokers think they're sneaky and they, well, I can completely avoid issues of that by just changing the property status straight to pending. Because then if it goes from pending back to active, what do you think happened?
Financing.
Bing, bing, bing. Oh, clearly there's nothing wrong with the property. It's just that the financing fell through.
Or someone just decided that. But not,
But nothing, yeah, you don't think the same thing just because of that status.
I see that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Do we need to do anything about that, or?
I think that, yes, I mean, we're supposed to be keeping, right? All of the listing is supposed to be reporting accurately, right? I have a problem with it, especially if you're the buyer broker. And you're in that situation where the listing broker changed the status from active to pending. And you guys are doing your inspection on Thursday and you're like, that's a lot of things wrong with this place. You already knew it and kind of forewarned the buyer already. I think that's the time where you're like, hey, listing broker, you guys inaccurately changed the status to pending. That needs to be changed to pending inspection.
Yeah.
I think you probably should.
Say thank you.
Yeah, they're gonna be not happy because they understand, that the reason they're doing that is for that reason.
Or is it, well, they're just laziness?
No,
No,
not
they're-
usually.
They're trying to be sneaky.
There is some prolific brokers who just constantly, they just do this, flippers, that's what I was saying, flippers they got listings that they're flipping all the time. And there's a few of these people, like literally, I'm like, oh, you gotta deal with this person? Oh, did they change the status straight to pending? I'm like, yeah, how'd you know? Yeah, because this is what they continually do. So watch out for that. Good thing to bring up. All right, Jason, you want to read B?
Sure, pending sale closing date. Buyer may not extend the closing date of the pending sale without seller's consent. If such extension would delay buyer's closing on seller's property.
Okay, so buyer can't extend the closing date, right? So without seller's consent. So if that, if all of a sudden the buyer's property that they're selling in Florida, we'll stick with that example. Let's say the buyer who's buying that property has a delay. They got a 2-day delay. Not gonna be able to close. You can't, it just doesn't automatically extend your purchase here. That has to be extended with the 22Y modification of closing date. So that has to, the seller's got to agree to that. Does the seller have to
No.
extend? We're dealing with a situation right now where multiple offers are starting to kind of heat up again in certain pockets of certain neighborhoods, even in a multi-million-dollar price range. You can't force any party to extend the agreement. There was one, they needed an extension for 1 day. And then they said, nope, sorry. You can't force them. So you really got to be prepared to handle that. Most of the time I tell people or tell brokers that if something's going to be delayed, you probably would have known that if you were in the proper communication with all the right parties. You would have already known you're going to have a delay, not on the day of closing.
Yeah.
That's just being busy.
Yeah. So if you guys if anybody's basically just waiting for the closing date to make things happen oh, I'm calling about closing today, we're supposed to close, did the buyer sign, or I mean, you have to be so in tune with your communication to all parties, especially when you are like 10 days before closing. That's probably the timing where you're like, okay, send yourself a calendar invite, reminder, something that's going to say, okay, it's time to reach out to the lender. Are we on target? Are we on schedule for the disclosures to go out?
That's-
How many days does the buyer have for disclosures? 3 days. Can you count Saturdays and Sundays and holidays?
No.
Do you remember?
I think you count Saturday.
Saturdays you can count. It's a weird thing
Thank
to remember, but Saturdays can count, but Sundays and holidays will not when it comes to the disclosures for buyers. So for sure, basically 3 days before closing, if they have not had those disclosures yet, you probably know you're gonna have a delay already.
Well, and then also off of the disclosure, I just had one where they sent the CD out 3 days prior, but only one of the borrowers signed it. So our timetable started when the second
Signed it.
signed it.
Yeah.
So, and then everybody missed it. And so we had to get an extension because we didn't have enough time for the CD.
Yeah, that's one that can easily get missed. You're like, oh, okay, they signed? Yeah, the one buyer signed.
Yeah.
You got
They
the other
got
one?
both of them.
Yeah,
Little-
they both
little
have to
trick.
sign it.
Don't miss it.
So realistically, you need to be in tune and knowing what's going on, and that's literally 10 days before closing. It's like, okay, it's go time. You did all the hard work in the beginning, right? With your client, you got the buyer agency agreement signed months before, you're showing properties. You're out there, you're finally showing, you finally get something under contract. You do the inspection, you get through that. The buyer's got fully underwritten approved now, the loan's approved that the lender told you. And now it's like, okay, I just gotta wait till my 5 days prior to closing walkthrough, right? That's kind of like my last kind of step. Like, no, like realistically, that 10 days, 7 to 10 day, the 1 week, at least should be your reminder. It should be the time to go find out where we are. Like what has been all the way
I always
done?
tell my buyers, like the very first week when you go on contract, you're busy.
Yeah,
Because you're scheduling your inspection, you're getting your earnest money in, you're doing all of your little checks. If there's a well, if there's a this, that week is really busy. And then the week before closing is really busy too, because you want to make sure your insurance binder is there. You want to make sure
Yeah.
your disclosures are sent out from the lender. You're doing your final walkthrough, you're doing all those things. And then in between those 2 weeks is when title and escrow are doing their things to make sure that the chain of title is good.
Yeah.
And they're getting all the documents ready. So I always explain to them, those 2 weeks are really busy, just so they kind of have
I
an idea.
That the time in between, when they're kind of,
Doing their stuff.
excited and they don't have their house yet, that's not the time to go RV shopping. It's
Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
time to buy a boat, or to buy
new
something.
car, we got appliances, don't apply for any credit.
And usually like on those 2 weeks that are kind of slow, on Friday, I'll do my end of the week updates and it's like, hey, buyer, clients, my end of the week update is, I have no update.
No update, love that.
But you have to reach out to them because then they'll, what's going on?
Yeah,
So,
if you do not have your scheduled, like updates,
Every
like
Friday.
every week. Some people do them Mondays, some people do them Fridays, whatever you do, totally fine, just don't not do it.
Yeah.
And
if you
even
don't
when you have no news, I know, I've said that probably 1,000 times, like, even if there's no news at all, there's no updates, you're still calling to say there's no new update.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, they're like,
What's made it easy?
you guys are, yeah, you're on top of it, you are on top of your A game. That's when they feel way more relaxed, more comfortable. And then again, you're like, yeah, there's no updates, but do you guys have any questions? Or is there anything else, that you guys need?
Yeah.
That's the difference between broker down here or a broker way up here. All right, failure to close sale of pending property or waive contingency. If buyer fails to close the pending sale through no fault of buyer and buyer does not waive the contingency, the agreement terminates and buyer is entitled to the earnest money. So if it falls through, then without them waiving it and moving forward, then basically they've got a protection that covers them, that they get their earnest money back. They need to sell this property in order to buy the other one. Cal, you want to do D?
Waiver of contingency without having sold pending property. If a buyer waives the contingency without having closed the pending sale, then buyer must close the sale of the property as set forth in the agreement. When the buyer waives buyer's pending sale of property contingency, buyer waives all other contingencies, examples, financing, inspection, etc., in the agreement.
Okay, so there's a fail safe, for protection for a seller in the event that they end up waiving that contingency and moving forward, then they waive everything else.
But if they get to closing and they can't close, let's say they represented that they could, but they
Yeah.
can't. They were just sort of hoping and praying, they just lose earnest money, correct?
Yep.
I mean, because that's the only remedy usually that's checked.
Forfeiture of earnest money and check. So I've got a scenario for you guys. This came from my South Hill office from an extremely experienced broker who'd been in the business probably at that time, probably at least 17 to 19 years. And her family business was new construction. They built new homes. They're still around today. They're still doing mini plats and custom homes. And so this is probably about 2012 that this happened. 2012, 2013. Anyways, our listing broker listed a new construction property, and a buyer came along and they were going to be VA, and they had $1,500 for earnest money is all they could do. But they got close to asking price and a little bit of closing costs. And the builder said, okay, we're gonna, we'll take it. That's the only offer we've had, it's been like 20-something days on the market, so they accepted the offer, but they were contingent. Or pending sale, 22Q, on the property. And the home wasn't quite finished yet. They were, they were still, it was still being finished. And so what happened is the buyer the buyer who was buying their home, it was a really small house and stuff, and it fell through. So they had to give notice, that the sale failed. But they didn't want to lose the home. So they waived and moved and elected to move forward. The listing broker builder came to me and said, they can't do that. We know they can't move forward, without selling the home. I verified with the lender and we got another offer now. That's a backup, that's way better. Full price, no closing costs. And it's cash and they'd close in 7 days. So they really were like, we want this other offer they can't do that. I'm like, yeah, they absolutely can.
They have no recourse.
Alice hit it right on the head. Like, what's the damage? Like, what would happen in the event they don't close?
$1,500.
$1,500 on this $700,000 home.
Yeah.
At that time,
The mistake was them accepting that offer in the first place.
Yep,
They made that mistake.
yeah.
Could the seller, they had the 21 days for financing, could they call them financing since
They waived everything.
They were
Yeah.
there.
They waived everything anyway. Finance contingency was waived.
You have to wait.
They had already done, didn't worry about the inspection. It was, and so that our listing broker is like, wow, this is a huge lesson for me. Like, it just really didn't think, that they could do this, knowing that we know they can't buy without selling. Well, it was a really small house. They just went ahead and listed it, because I think the situation was it was an off market. Someone was buying it. They already had it under a contract. I think it was like a family friend or somebody. Well, they didn't qualify. They couldn't end up buying it. So they ended up listing the property and sold it. And by the time, they actually finished the house, they literally closed and then closed on the new construction house.
Hmm.
And the builder, had to move forward. They didn't have a choice. So you really got to think about listing brokers of how much earnest money are on these contracts. Is it really going to sting for someone to waive these types of things and say, yeah, we're going to move forward. I think we can still end up selling. And so, yeah. Big lesson though.
So I got a question. So, I had a seller that, I actually found her another house to buy. And so on that one, instead of doing a contingent sale on her existing house, we did a knock loan.
Oh, yeah.
But then we listed it at the same time so that we didn't have to say that we were
Right.
contingent sale or anything. And so we were kind of playing it, hoping that we were to sell it before we needed it for a
Yeah.
knock loan. But we did need to use the knock loan. So you have to disclose to that because you are using the knock loan.
Yeah. As long as you're disclosing you're getting a loan.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I
The
did-
Jerry Maguire clause,
Yes, I did.
show me the money. Gotta have proof in that. So, yeah, you absolutely can do
We
things like
didn't want to
that.
have to go contingent sale,
Mhm.
but she wanted to list it and sell it. So we just got the knock in place and then immediately listed her house and hoping that it would sell before the closing, but then it didn't.
But you ended up selling it
We
right
did.
after.
Well, yeah, like
Is
months
that
later.
a bridge loan?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Knock is the lender, right?
Yeah, yep. Mhm.
And they kind of specialized in that niche for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they fronted all
Yeah.
the equity to
Sure.
move forward into
I've done
that.
bridge loan.
Yeah.
Aaron and Priority Home Lending, they've got one. A bunch of lenders have some
Yeah.
different programs that are very similar.
Mhm.
So you can do things like that and avoid going,
Yeah.
contingent.
Yeah, because a lot of sellers don't want to.
Yeah, sellers don't wanna do it. All right, so time to fill in the blanks, right? Look at the form itself, so obviously the date of the contract, buyer's names, seller's name, property address. First thing you have to do is disclose, where is the property? What is the property that is, that's contingent on the closing of the sale? Oh, wait, I skipped an important part, didn't I? Last one. It did. E is notice of failure of sale. So if the pending sale fails to close through no fault of buyer, buyer must notify seller within 2 days. So there's the word must. So you got 2 business days to notify the seller of that deal falling through. And you would have to get down to the 90s, and I think it is the contingent property, or let's see.
And if they fail to provide that notice within that time frame,
Then, I mean, they're in default then. I think at that point, if they failed, I think the seller could probably
Keep
kick them to the curb.
and
Like
keep
in that-
insurance money.
Yeah, I would say, you didn't notify us.
What happens on the contingent sale? They're in contract with somebody, it fails, but they had a backup offer. Would you have?
Who had the back, the seller
Yeah,
of the
that-
first sale
the first sale
has a backup?
has a backup offer.
Mhm.
First sale, I know this is like a weird scenario.
Yeah,
But they had so they're in contracts. And they're using this as their contingent sale to buy their other property, but they have a backup for their initial. It fails, they go to the backup says, yeah, we want the house. Do they need to tell that to because now they're still,
well, when you say contingent, I'm gonna make sure doesn't get confused. That's not a 22B. Because if they're in a 22B, you can get bumped.
right,
It's basically second buyer's notice addendum that, hey, seller has a contract in place. But, we will accept yours, but what items are you willing to waive? Right? Are you gonna waive inspection? Are you gonna, waive Form 17? And you wanna make sure that you're not gonna just kick someone to the curb and get into contract with someone else and then they just terminate on you. Now you got nobody
yeah.
buying your house. So with your example, if you're saying there's a 22Q pending sale. And if that one's gonna fail and they give it's all gonna come down to what will the notice be though, which we're gonna look at next from that 22Q pending sale
Yeah.
buyer.
Interesting.
Because then you can do what you want, is if they're terminating because they can't move forward. So let's see,
All the crazy scenarios that could happen.
yeah. I think it should say. Buyer's pending sale contingency notice. I think this is it, 90U. Yes, so 90U is the addendum you will utilize to basically give notice for either the termination because the deal dies or that you're waiving and moving forward. So let's look at this part. Failure to close and termination. Buyer hereby gives notice that the pending sale identified in the buyer's pending sale of property contingency addendum form 22Q has failed or will fail to close. So they know it's gonna fail. You kind of want to have certainty in that. I don't think I would be giving the notice, unless you absolutely
Sure.
have the proof. This agreement shall terminate and the earnest money shall be refunded to buyer. So in that event, you would be marking that box on line 5. And you would include a form, what, if the earnest money is deposited? What's the other form?
50, right?
What did you say?
Is it 50?
50, yes. Woo, 50. If there's always, how you tell you're using 50 is if in the event the deal's dying or you're getting out of the deal and you're actually using language from either some sort of a contingency, they always say that word, in the event buyer elects to terminate, the earnest money shall be refunded to buyer. You kind of hear that kind of same phrase, the attorney language throughout a bunch of our contingent forms. 35, home inspection contingency, definitely one of the ones that probably gets utilized the most. Financing contingency. They can't get financing. Now with that one, you gotta prove 3 items. that goes with it, which we went over a little while ago, but same thing, if earnest money's deposited, use the 50. Even if it's not deposited, sometimes, you know, realistically, we're supposed to include it, because it says, you know, earnest money. What I would do is put the amount in the parentheses, was not deposited. Just to kind of like finalize the ending. So sometimes you'll get people like, I'm not signing that. Like, whatever, I did my job. The forms manual and stuff says that you will do that, so that's the proper way.
If you do an inspection, you know, if you time it right,
Yeah,
then you might have it's 5 days.
yeah,
You're going to contract on Thursday, but you get your inspection done on Sunday and it's like it fails and they didn't even have time to.
yeah. Didn't have time to deposit the money yet.
And route.
Yep. All right, so now the second option is the waiver. Even though the pending sale identified in buyer's pending sale of property contingency addendum form 22Q has not closed, buyer hereby elects to proceed with this agreement, waives the pending sale of property contingency, and agrees to close this sale as provided in the agreement. Buyer understands that by waiving the pending sale of property contingency, buyer waives all other remaining contingencies, including financing and inspection in the agreement. Why? Why do they do this? Why would the attorneys put something like this into the language? we're gonna call on the Zoom people. You guys are too quiet. Zoom people, why would we do this? Zoe? Or Gavin? Why does the buyer have to waive all other contingencies if they do this?
They can agree.
We tested it, they said they could. Oh, we dropped a couple. Let's see. Sandra? You have any idea, or Ricky?
Okay, so that they can't get out of jail using the other contingencies, I guess.
Well, who does this damage? Let's think about it.
Property's off the market, no one's.
Property's still tied up. The closing date's the same. They know that the buyer, you know, is waiving these items. Who does this protect now? When they waive?
So the seller.
Seller. Yeah,
The seller's taking on more risk by allowing the buyer to continue.
exactly. The teeth in the contract is now that's kind of geared more towards protecting the seller, because what if they end up, the deal dies like 2 weeks in, you know, 2 weeks in, now they got another 2 weeks left to like stay in contract and they can't do anything? So it really protects the seller.
And on the buyer side, if you're gonna agree to this, you wanna darn sure your financing is rock solid.
Yeah,
You wanna make sure the property is in good shape.
Or you're willing to gamble your
And
earnest money.
And that you can either get a bridge loan before this closes, or
Yep.
you have certainty that your house would close before
yeah.
this.
So let's say this is the scenario, the pending sale, let's say the property they're buying is $750,000. The home they're selling was 500. Now they were getting their 20% down coming from that sale. Okay. And then let's say that the buyer who was buying their property in Florida lost his job and couldn't move forward. Now, if they end up waiving and moving forward, they still have to like figure out like where's their down payment money coming from, right? So if you're in that situation, your buyer's gonna have to work closely with the lender, and you guys better have a plan kind of figured out, right? It's like, what can we, you know, what can we do to still close on this deal?
And then the lender's gonna be like, well, your DTI, factoring both of these payments.
Yeah,
There's gonna be, you're needing the cash to close. You know, there's a bunch of different things you need to make sure that they can qualify.
100%. So realistically, you know, this is exactly why the language is here, is to protect the seller more, because if they can't just close at the closing table at the end of the day, that seller's probably more than likely damaged.
Yeah.
Because they kept going.
How does this pertain to that Jerry McGuire clause, you know, in? How now does this responsibility go to the buyer to disclose and say where the money's coming from?
Yeah, well, so you remember Jerry Maguire clause is Form 21, item A, right? Buyer has sufficient funds to close the sale in accordance to the agreement, right? That's the kind of default language. And this transaction is all cash unless otherwise specified in the agreement, or US funds, it even says, so. Cash, liquid, checkings or savings, right? Well, the first things first, when someone's gonna, buy a property, if they're utilizing all of their funds from the sale of that home.
Right.
Let's say it was 100%, let's flip flop the price range. They're selling our house for $750,000 in Florida, buying a $500,000 home here. They're all cash. Well, you have to disclose, is that cash in their account now? Or if it's coming from the sale of that property. So now you're using 22Q, that it's a pending sale. You don't have to use a 22A because they're not going to have financing.
Right.
You're covered because it's right there that the home that they can't move forward.
Right, but then once they waive it, what happens?
Once they waive it, then they better close or they're risking their earnest money. They'll be in breach.
In breach, yeah.
Yeah, the buyer will be in breach.
Then the seller, and they waive this, could you say, all right, well, you were gonna be utilizing your fund from the contingent sale. I need to see like something that shows I have certainty that you're gonna close. You ask for that?
There's nothing that.
Well,
forces them. to do
There's
that.
nothing that forces them. Yeah, if they waive it, it's like they just know that the only thing they're risking is earnest money. That for you listing brokers, that's the timing for consultation before you even agree to accepting one of these offers. Is how much is earnest money? How much would they end up risking? Now, you guys are exactly right. You're literally tracking exactly what you should be thinking about. Like, okay, they were using all the funds from the sale from the home in Florida. Well, now they're not selling it. They can't, the buyer fell through. They still want to move forward. Do they have the other funds? I think it's perfectly fine to ask Jason, same thing, like, okay, it looks like you guys are gonna waive this and move forward. How are you going to close? You did state that all of your funds were coming from the sale of this home. Well, maybe they had enough funds to do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're doing a bridge loan real fast and they're like, oh, we're just gonna do it
And on
this
the-
way.
On the flip side, if you're representing a buyer and you're gonna do this, and you're gonna be like, hey, you know what, we applied for a knock loan or a bridge loan.
Yeah,
Hey, we have a stock portfolio that they can take a quick loan off of.
Mhm.
Here's our certainty, we're
Yeah.
gonna show you this so that they can sign off on it.
yeah, I think that would be a great plan. Because to at least a savvy listing broker who fully understands
Yeah.
the risks involved in doing a deal, like this, until that house is closed and sold and finished. And they have the funds.
But the point is once they've already accepted the, 22Q,
Yep.
this waiver is is a notice. It isn't anything
Yeah.
the seller gets
No.
to say
Yeah,
yes or
look.
no to.
No.
Look, see seller signatures on there at all?
Nope.
At the
So-
beginning.
so if
This is a conversation
buyer-
at the beginning.
Buyer and buyer agent decide to, give them a little peace of mind saying, yeah, we have these alternative funds and that's kind of a nice way to do business, but there's nothing in the contract that requires it.
That's exactly right.
Up front, when you're consulting, saying, let's ask you this up front.
Yeah, here's the risks.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at this, the date pending sale property, insert the date of the purchase agreement for the sale of buyer's property. So
And you're not even.
this is the date.
Dominoes.
yeah, this is the date of the pending sale of the contract that it's written, right? Not the closing date. The complete purchase and sale agreement for the pending sale must be attached to this agreement. The term pending sale includes property that may be subject to an inspection, feasibility, or any other contingency. So there's the answer to the question I gave you guys at the very beginning of class. Okay, so pending sale closing date. Buyer may not extend the closing date of the pending sale if such extension would delay the closing of this agreement without seller's prior written consent. An extension, oh, if it's such extension, yeah, it would delay. So failure to close, there's the one about, must be given, the notice must be given. Notice of failure to close, buyer should or must give notice to seller within 2 days of learning that the pending sale has failed. Such notice must be given regardless of whether buyer chooses to proceed with this agreement. If buyer does not timely give such notice, then buyer shall be in default. Next, and the last is buyer's waiver. Buyer's waiver of this contingency constitutes the waiver of all other contingencies in the agreement, including without limitation, any inspection, financing, or other contingency. What is one key thing that they could be waiving that could end up biting them even more? What do you think?
Appraisal.
Bingo.
Yeah.
The appraisal.
Mhm.
The appraisal for that subject property they're buying, what if it comes in low?
Mhm.
They waived it.
Mhm.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah, and they may not be able to close. Yeah. So I've done deals where the pending sale actually was contingent on another sale.
Oh, yeah.
That's Domino
Yeah,
out of state, and that was real fun.
yeah, I've seen 4 deals
Yeah.
tied all together.
You wanna talk?
This
about
one's buying
complicated.
this one, this one's buying this one, this one's buying this one, 4 contingent, like,
And
madhouse.
And 4 different title escrow offices.
Oh, that's,
It's a nightmare.
yeah, you would not want that.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't been in that kind of market in a lot of years, but
Yeah.
that coming out of the recession, that was not
Yeah.
common.
So let's talk about closing dates. When you're writing a deal and you're closing, let's say this deal is closing on, I don't know, let's look at the calendar. Let's see. Let's say, closing date for the pending sale is closing on Friday, the 28th. That's 2 more days, right? Closing. What is the closing date you are writing for this deal you're buying?
Grant. Try to have it with the same title and escrow and see if they can make it happen.
Do you want to do the same day?
Concurrent closings. Same day, yikes.
When do you have to do it by? There's something quite different about 22Q compared to 22B. A pending sale to a contingent sale.
Because the 22B, it's 3 days, right?
It automates to 3 days to after the closing of that contingent property. And it supersedes your closing date on the front page.
Right.
What closing date would you pick for this, or can you? Is there anything you have to do?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I'll admit that. Been years. And
What do you think, Jason? No? No. Cal, want to take a stab in the dark?
Well, you're saying one closes on Friday, the 31st, right?
Friday, the 28th.
28th. So you would think Tuesday, 3 days.
So that would be for contingent 22B, but a 22Q, this is the thing.
same day.
No, you can choose anything you want. There's nothing that's defined on when you will end up closing that sale. It doesn't state that you have to close.
Well, but in reality, they've sold their house, they probably
Yeah.
need a place to live, so unless they're renting in the interim, right?
Yeah. It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Yeah, so it's whatever date you choose, that's the date you choose. If you're gonna go the route with, you know, the exact same day, I agree with Jason, having the same title and escrow company of if the sale or the, you know, the property they're selling to buy, or excuse me, the selling, and then the ones that they're buying, having them at the same office and same branch and the same closing team and everything will make a huge difference in trying to handle all of those. Otherwise, they just release, you know, we're recording, we're done with our job. It's up to the other company to handle theirs. You know, wires will have to go out.
It cuts it close.
And also like unless you state otherwise, you know, possessions at 9 o'clock, not recording numbers.
Yeah.
So you could be not moving into your new house until 9, if you needed a place to go.
Yeah,
So it's like, there's so many like moving pieces in that thing, that scenario.
yeah. If you can work things out and you're at good, clear communication with all parties and everyone's on top of things. And you have the same title and escrow company and everybody's working together, it can happen. You can get that.
2 houses that I've purchased, we've done concurrent closings on the
Yeah.
same day.
Yeah,
Same thing, it's like, oh, well, we can't be out until our movers you can have the house at 6. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, my movers are, okay, I guess I'll have to move my movers till later, and so you have a place to stay, because you don't wanna rent
Right.
someplace, you have all your stuff in storage for like a day.
yeah, it's hard. I mean, you gotta have everything figured out. It's like, does the clients have their moving stuff, you know, moving vans and their, you know, everything dialed in? And possession being at 9 PM, that's of closing.
Unless
They
you
don't,
specify.
unless you guys can, yeah,
I put
specify
I
different.
put recording numbers on all of that other box. Is that a good idea?
You do
Different
what?
possession, you take possession at recording numbers, so that you have to wait till 9 o'clock.
Did you change like the boilerplate language in the form?
Yeah,
There's a point,
or-
there's where it says other.
Yeah.
you
could
said
put
other. I
Other.
said
On receiving recording number.
Yeah, on recording numbers, take possession on recording numbers, because
I've
then they
done
can
that.
get it from anywhere from like noon to,
As long as it's
Fine.
clear enough.
Yeah.
Cause what does that, you know, someone could, like, where could you push back on that? Recording numbers
county recording.
online, it's showing online.
When title and escrow,
Well, I said I would give it on, when it's, the county's changed it online and I can see it, it's public records.
Hmm.
See what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you don't know, like, could someone argue
Yeah.
and say, oh, no. You know,
because I've
I
always
mean
put just on
this,
recording numbers, just so that you don't have to wait till 9.
Yeah.
You know, when it recorded at the county, you can go grab, and I always ask the listing broker.
that's the key
It's like,
thing,
hey,
listing
can
broker,
Hey, can we-
property's vacant. Are you gonna be okay with us getting at, you know,
Access.
access right when
No
recording
problem.
numbers coming in? Yeah. Most people are good with it, but if you have an ugly transaction and things aren't going good,
Yeah,
We took possession of a house we bought in Spokane and the seller still wasn't out at 9.
oh, yeah.
And the
We've
place
had
was
that too.
filthy and, like she dumped a huge bag of dog food all over the kitchen and it was a nightmare.
Oh, I've seen, probably the worst one I've seen was when someone came and they not only leave it trash and stuff, they took every light bulb in the house.
We ended up having to call the police to get her escorted out of the house. I mean, it was
Wow.
bad. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, once in a great while, you know, you might have
I
issues
think
with
she
that.
was smoking something.
So,
What remedy is there for that, or is it you just deal with it?
But that's-
yeah, you
that's
deal with it.
trespassing.
I mean,
there's squatters, if they stay indefinitely, you have to evict them.
Right.
You have to do that. Yeah,
yeah, that's
in
not
this
fun.
state, that's no fun.
Mm-mm. All right, and then of course you got an other box, you know, number 7. Spaces which rarely is used, you can put in some other things concerning the pending sale contingency. That one's rare. Definitely wouldn't get used a lot. All right, any last questions before we jump to our next form? Pretty good. All right, so now time for 22R, the well addendum to purchase and sale agreement. General comments, use. Attach this addendum to the purchase and sale agreement if the sale is conditioned on an inspection of the well or water system. However, this form only covers inspections of the well serving the property. If buyer wants to condition the sale on an inspection of the property and its improvements in general, use inspection addendum MLS form 35. B, explain it to the parties. Make sure your client understands this addendum. In particular, explain to buyer that if buyer fails to give written notice disapproving the inspection, buyer waives this inspection condition and will be contractually obligated to close regardless of the condition of the well or water system. Let's see, C, Alice, you want to read C?
Other provisions, the provisions of this addendum supersede any other provisions contained in the agreement that relate to wells or water systems. Therefore, if you use this form in a purchase and sale transaction, make certain that all of the provisions regarding the well or the water system are contained in this addendum.
Yeah, so,
Do they count for shared wells too? Cause I had a shared well and then
Yeah.
they just gave all
Yeah.
of the information from like the testing on it.
yeah, a lot of times communities and stuff, they have like maintenance agreements
Yeah.
typically. We're gonna jump to the King County site in a little bit to show you guys where, you know, you can like look for some stuff. Well, documents. Seller is required to deliver to buyer all documents in seller's possession associated with the well. Any listing brokers, if you got a well, I mean, I think it's a good idea, just have that stuff in your supplements, in the documents, you know, transaction desk. Get those up front. You know,
Kinda
So
like the RSS, OSS report.
all of it, yeah, if you can.
the well documents, in my understanding, is I sold a house at almost the top of Mount Spokane.
Wow.
And it had a lot of minerals that would come into the well. And they had a reverse osmosis system that was quite expensive that was associated with the well. And they actually were required to give not only, you know, testing information on the well, but also the information on the reverse
System.
osmosis
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
That it had been tested and maintained and actually was doing what it was supposed to do. And it was a really big deal.
Oh, yeah.
The last one I did, it was a shared, well, it was like between like 4 or 5 houses.
Mhm.
And they had it tested every year,
Yeah.
just regardless.
Yeah,
And so they didn't send any additional people out there. They just sent us what the last test was on it. So I don't know if there's a rule, because I know with septic, they changed it from 6 months to a year.
yeah.
I'm guessing it's probably similar for a well.
Yeah, I mean. Buyer still has a right to get a test the water, you know, themselves. You can pull a water sample and go send that into a lab, which we're gonna talk about.
And it takes time.
Yep, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, unless you pay the Russian.
But both, realistically, it's, yeah, maintenance, any of the maintenance agreements, maintenance records, if the seller has them, provide them. And it just, again, it just makes the, you know, the buyer feel a little more at ease, seeing that it's been maintained.
Are these stored at the county level too, or is that just for the septic tanks?
Oh,
I think
Yeah, you'll see.
I think there are.
all right, assistance in filling in the blanks, the date of the purchase sale agreement, buyer's name, seller's name, property address. Very first thing, like Jason's wondering, like, is this from just single well or what? Number 5 is number of connections. Indicate the number of connections to the well in the space provided.
And that can be house and barn.
It could be everything.
It could be on the same, you know, owned property.
Yep. For ADUs, status. If it's on a well, how many connections?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one if not filled in, definitely fill these in. Next, well documents review period. Insert the number of days seller has to provide any well documents to buyer. 10 days is the default. Insert the number of days buyer has to give written notice disapproving the well documents. 5 days is the default. So let's look at that. Okay, so seller shall deliver to buyer all documents in seller's possession associated with the well, including but not limited to shared well agreements and maintenance records within 10 days, not filled in, of mutual acceptance. If buyer and buyer's sole discretion does not give notice of disapproval within 5 days of receipt of the above documents or the date that the above documents are due, whichever is earlier, then this well documents review period shall conclusively be deemed satisfied, or which means waived, If buyer gives timely notice of disapproval, then this agreement shall terminate and the earnest money shall be refunded to buyer. There's that key phrase again I talked about earlier, right? All contingencies. So there's a well notice or in the 90s
Then Form 50.
and a Form 50. Yeah, it should say right here, buyer's notice of termination well, it's a 90X.
That's why I keep coming to these classes. So questions like that, that's something.
Oh, yeah. Until you deal with, having a property that's a well, you forget it because it's not the stuff you're, using on a day-to-day.
I think I've only done 2 transactions with her.
Use it
Well,
or lose it.
So here's the one, the buyer's notice of termination well addendum pursuant to the well addendum Form 22R. Buyer hereby gives notice of disapproval of the well inspection report and elects to terminate the agreement. Buyer demands the return of the earnest money. No seller signature on that, one-sided. So Form 50 along with this and the buyer's out.
Really, it could be like, they don't like the like, with an inspection, they don't like the color of the door. You could, whatever's in there, you could.
You could, yeah. Maybe they're like, looks like the water levels have been dropping every year by year. I don't want to get 5 more years into this and all of a sudden find out we need to get a new well drilled. Yeah. All right. So there's the review period, number 4, well inspection. Get up to that one.
Not to mention a new well, you'd have to be looking at water rights and whether or not they could even tap the new well.
I kind of an interesting one, so I had a Sioux Creek water.
Oh, yeah.
But I had a irrigation well on my property because it was a pretty big parcel and we used it for watering our grass and everything. Well, Sioux Creek said, no, it's Covington water actually. They said that we couldn't have their water and then irrigation well on the property. So we actually had to cap that one off
Yeah.
and then had to hook our water into our irrigation, which in the summertime, it went from 0 cost to like $500 a month to like water our grass because they didn't allow us to have the irrigation well, which is silly.
That's, yeah. I mean, they got reasons for all of those.
Yeah.
Just, what happens to runoff water, if you're on a hillside or something, where's the water going? I mean, all these things come into play. Or contaminating one source of water into another, in case that one's bad, now you're just making the other water bad too. So there's a bunch of reasons on why they try to do that stuff. Water management, yep, 100%.
Thank you.
All right, so there's the review contingency for that. I think that the default is perfectly fine for this one, for the documents. Well, documents, keep them on a default. 10 days for seller to get it by, 5 days for buyer to review. But the 10 days is all they have to get it to you, so you better make sure you get all the documents, within the 10 days, buyer brokers. Water quality and water quantity contingencies. This is the big one. Disapproval of inspection or request for modifications. Insert the number of days buyer has to give written notice disapproving the inspection report for the water quality inspection and for the water quantity inspection. 15 days is the default for each. If buyer requests repairs to the system for water quality or water quantity or modifications to the agreement, the parties can negotiate using Form 22RN, which is the well addendum response. How long do you think it takes to get reports back from a lab on a well?
It's at least 2 weeks.
That is the question.
I mean, isn't it? I'm haven't done it on this side of the mountains, but over on the other side, it was at least 2 weeks. And if you wanted anything sooner than that, you paid a big fee for rushing.
Yeah, so I would say, you better have probably 18 days in there, at least. It's probably a good window. I know some people will write this up and they put 20 every single time. Because the labs take a long time. And it's all upon 2 weeks from them when they receive it.
Right.
So how long does it take to go get the sample? Send it in? Cal?
Just question on this. So is the seller able to go and get any of this done before listing
yeah.
and then have it all ready? Like
That's
that?
amazing.
Yep.
That's a great, that's
So when you're.
what you
making the-
want.
When you're making the agreement and everything, could you tell the seller, hey, it'd be prudent of you to have this done right away?
Well, they do it yearly, typically, they test this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you should be, anybody who owns a well, they should be doing that every year, but. How long or what do you do for septic systems? What's the maintenance on those? What should you be doing?
It's 6 months, once a year.
Yeah, every year, I mean, kind of say that you should be maintaining it, it needs to be maintained.
I've listed properties where they've had a septic for 30 years and they've never.
Never touched
touched
it, yeah, that's what I mean, this is exactly what happens even with people with water.
Yeah.
You walk in their house and like every toilet, the tub and all of it is rust color. Right? They're like, oh yeah, we got free well water. It's amazing. Like, oh, when's the last time you tested this thing? What? No, what's that about? 20 years ago, maybe? 15? I don't know. Somewhere in there.
And also, all these tests are a snapshot in time, so whenever it happens,
Exactly.
who knows what's moving forward, like if the test was done 9 months ago, what? Did they fertilize their grass?
Yeah.
Did they, yeah, you don't know what it is now.
Yeah, we got a bunch of cattle now. All right, ain't that great? Goes in the creek, goes to the well.
Water.
You don't, yeah, you just don't know. So 15 days is not enough time unless it's already been sent in or something. I don't know. Then again, it all depends on what exact tests that you're gonna have performed. So there are a couple different well inspectors. There's one that kind of services a lot of people from this office. So if you guys need that, just reach out and we can help get that for you guys. But 15 days is too tight. That's probably not gonna be enough time. Unless you end up getting the sample on day one of mutual or something, Even then, if it takes 2 weeks from when they get it, you guys could be in the situation where it's not back in time and your contingency is gonna be up.
Almost like a feasibility period, huh?
It is. It really is. Same thing goes for the water quantity, right? Gotta make sure that the quantity is gonna last, right? The flow rates, the verification that the source is adequate, compliance with federal, state, or local standards. And 3, any other matter of concern to buyer, the water quantity test shall be performed by a qualified professional. That one you definitely you'd have to hire a well inspector.
Mhm.
Don't hire a home inspector for this one. You need someone who is a specific well tester. They will collect the sample, they will send it into their lab person who's way faster. These tests definitely cost more than the ones you just scoop the water yourselves and mail in or send in or drop off. So you just got to be prepared if the properties has a well. Okay, so King County does have a groundwater well data on the website. It's green2.kingcounty.gov/groundwater/default.aspx. Or just do the well data search. I think you can even do it this one, which it will take you here. If you have a parcel number, that's the fastest way. Put in the 10-digit parcel number. And it tells you count of wells. 1. Here's the well ID. Here's the location. There's the depth. Has water level data? No. Has water quality, quality data? Yes. Here's the local number. Ecology well tag, unknown, parcel. I don't know what a GWMA code is. Oh, the basin's from Middle Green River. And then Cara area 1 in King County. So you can click in and see the well ID. if there's any water level sampling data, it would be here, and same thing for the quality sample. Oh, there has been, perfect. So it says, here's the test. Does it have the date? Yeah, so 2002, you can see when's the last sample. So this property, I just pulled this from a brand new listing that went on the market like yesterday. So they haven't had a sample thing since 2002. So you see what I'm saying? Like this is that's the type of stuff you can look up. So you as the listing broker, same thing. I would probably, look up the property. Does this have oh yeah, these are just,
It's interesting. It doesn't have flow rate.
because it doesn't have one.
No.
I think that's in this one. The water level sampling data, I think, is where that one, flow rate and all that would be. The record would be. So it's updated as of January 22nd, 2025. So they might have had it done since before they went on the market. They could have. But it's just not quite updated. So you might have to call in to King County and get the information. You can look at the groundwater well viewer. Let's do a hybrid that can kind of see.
So the orange squares are the wells.
Yes, so,
If you click on one, does it show?
no, oh, there it is. Yep. Yep, different wells. Detailed report. Goes back to that same one.
Mhm.
So you can see all the different wells. Let's see. Look at all the wells.
That Auburn.
Yeah, Lake Taps. There's Pierce County line.
Isn't where I've been from, most of the places, localities, they're having people get rid of the wells and go city water. That's not happening so much around here.
I'm guessing that even if the well is there, I mean, they probably need the record that it's still there. Yeah, that. I'm guessing if it's not active and no connections to it, they probably still would leave it here for record keeping. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of these could have been,
I don't
connected.
think there's the same push in Pierce County to
No, I don't think so.
and septic that there is in King County.
I
Yeah,
think in this area, though, it's pretty rural still.
yeah, that part of it, yeah, Auburn and stuff.
It's very
Definitely.
similar to the septic system
Mhm.
maps that they have.
Yeah, I don't know what maybe the purple ones are the ones that are not active anymore. I don't know. Let's see what that one is. Oops. I don't know what the purple means. Nothing and. Yep, tests from nitrates and whatnot. Huh, I don't know what the difference is. I don't see a map or anything. Unless it's down here. Oh, there it is. A group A well, group B well, group D well. And then green is selected. So I don't know we'd have to find out what the group's meanings are. Could be shared, what's not shared. Circle K stores,
And then business.
even business on it.
That's when you know you're out in the sticks.
Yeah. All right, any last questions, you guys? That is it for today. Thank you for making it to another forms class. Next week, we will continue our journey into all of our forms. I think that, actually, we'll be in April. Yeah, we're jumping into forms into April, so stay tuned for the next one, guys. Thanks for making it.